All right. Hello. I'm Sarah Wilson, Executive Director of Uptown United Uptown Chamber. Pleased to conduct the interview today with you, Patrick Nagle, one of the candidates for the 46th Ward Aldermanic race, who unfortunately was unable to join us at the forum, but are very pleased that you're able to commit the time today to answer the same exact questions that were asked at the forum. So our neighbors, our businesses all have the opportunity to hear your response. Pleased to introduce you to Matthew Ruffey, whom you may know. He is the Board of Directors President for Chicago Market, who is opening their first co-op grocery store in that gorgeous building behind him at the northwest corner of Broadway and Wilson later this year. He's also behind the Chicago Farmers Market, which is moving over to Sunnyside Fall this year, along with Grow Uptown Garden, and he's around the community utilizing his global and local business experience. So very excited, Matthew, to have you go ahead and get us started.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Patrick, truly, thank you for doing this. Thank you for giving us a chance to hear your answers to this as well. And beyond that, thank you for putting your hat in the race on this. I said it to the others as well. It's really impressive when people take the time to dedicate their time and effort and money and everything else that goes into not only the position that you're running for, but the election process. So thank you very much for taking the time to do this.
Well, and thank you, by the way, for making time for me today. I apologize again for not being in town for the forum, but I'm really glad to have the opportunity to talk to you today.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And with that, let's get right into it. So we already discussed logistics, but just as a reminder, so you'll have 2 minutes for this question. And so Uptown United's mission is to retain our thriving businesses, attract new businesses, build on our unique diversity, and continue to make Uptown a safe and attractive place to live, work, and play. So please take a minute to introduce yourself, but also during that, help us understand in your opening what over the next 4 years is your plan on how to build on Uptown's exciting momentum.
Well, sure. So I'm Patrick Nagle, and I'm running for alderman in the 46th Ward. I moved to Buena Park in over 30 years ago with my family when I was younger. And when I got my first place, I also stayed in Buena Park. 16 years ago, I moved to Lakeview, East Lakeview, just 2 blocks south of Irving Park, where my wife and I are raising our family. My parents are still in the ward. They're in Sheridan Park now. So I've spent a lot of time in Uptown over the course of my life. I've probably gone to about 70 concerts between the Aragon and the Riv and Double Door, which is now more conveniently located than it used to be for us. And so I've spent a lot of time from an entertainment standpoint and from a living standpoint in and around what we consider to be the Uptown neighborhood. I also now in Lakeview have spent the last 12 years on the board of the East Lakeview Neighbors. So I know what it's like to be involved in the community and to work with local businesses and charities in my community. And that's something that that I think helps translate well into Uptown. I have, from a professional standpoint, worked in public service my entire career. I've been an attorney with the federal government. I've been a federal prosecutor. I've been a judge for the last 13 years. In the last 6 years, I've been chief judge of the Social Security Administration, where I oversee 1,500 judges and 8,000 staff across the country. So I also have some executive leadership skills that I think are also important for this type of job. Most importantly, though, I promise you, as your 46th Ward Alderman, that I'll be an independent voice for the people of this ward. I won't be beholden to outside interests, and I'm not going to be engaging in backroom deals. I'll be transparent and open for everyone. And I will fight to get the resources that we need for our neighborhoods to be safe and to be vibrant for everyone so that we can continue to make progress. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Patrick. Appreciate that. First, we're going to, and again, we're sticking on that 2-minute time frame logistics for these questions. But so first, we're going to talk about small business and economic development. So again, Uptown United and the Uptown Chamber of Commerce work hand in hand with small businesses to ensure that they remain the backbone of our neighborhoods. With the rise of online shopping, increased occupancy costs for local businesses, high property taxes, red tape at City Hall, the list goes on and on. Owning and operating small businesses in Chicago continues to be a challenge. So the question we have is, what is your strategy to support Uptown's business community and encourage economic growth? And would ask you to please be specific if you can.
Sure. Well, I think the first and foremost on the list, in order for our small businesses to thrive, we need to have a safe environment where people feel comfortable walking the streets and going to those businesses. We also need the infrastructure that we can use to support that, and that comes in sidewalks and cityscaping and other things, and public transportation and all the things that the government really has a real large hand in. And I think we've done a good job in Uptown with the new subway stations and with some other advancements over the last decade or so. But the safety issue is really critical, because if people don't feel safe going out at night, for example, a lot of businesses are going to struggle that rely on, restaurants in particular, that rely on nighttime activities. So I think that's got to be a key fundamental block. But also, and you've alluded to this, commercial property taxes are really high, and we can't keep pushing those taxes onto our small and independent businesses, because it makes it very difficult for them to survive and make a profit. We talk about red tape. Cutting through the permit process, I think, is really important. It takes way too long for new businesses to even get going once they try, and rent can be expensive. So it's important that we make sure that we're moving expeditiously as a city, because again, that's a government function to get people up and running in their businesses. And then, there's also the labor job issue, right? Like, we've had a labor scarcity. It's hard for a lot of small businesses to find people to work there. I think there are things we can do, like through Truman College and the Northside American Job Center programs, where we can actually get people paired up with actual local businesses that could use the help. I think we have to be more aggressive about that. But overall, I think being a champion for the neighborhood and the community, and for letting people know that, the Uptown of today is a vibrant and fun place that people want to come to, and dispelling myths people might have about Uptown and about the 46th Ward is an important part of that, and being a champion to get people to invest in our community.
Thank you, Patrick. We'll talk now a little bit about planning. And again, Uptown United is engaged in many catalytic studies and neighborhood planning activities that have helped to support small businesses, to facilitate development, and improve the quality of life for Uptown residents and businesses alike. One of the more notable would be the Central Uptown Plan, and most recently, United explored the new equitable transit-oriented development ordinance and how it may be implemented in the future. Even when it's in front of me, it's still a tongue twister. The question that we'd have for you is, as alderperson, what are the top 3 planning initiatives that you'll seek to implement in the 46th Ward?
So I know that people in the 46th Ward have been working for many years on the entertainment district. I still think that we need a little more cohesion in terms of matching up the music venues that we have, which are great, with restaurants and, with the available transportation. We've got the subways, but parking is very difficult in that area. And if we're having multiple concerts at once, and hopefully with the opening of the Uptown Theater at some point in the future, I anticipate there'll be a lot of people coming to the neighborhood, and we have to kind of plan for that ahead of time, and make sure that we have adequate ways to deal with transportation. That's certainly one high priority, is getting that kind of those pieces together and bringing people together, really, to make sure that we're all on the same page and we're talking about that issue. You mentioned the transit-oriented developments. I think that's also big. I've been on the Zoning and Development Committee for over a decade in the 46th Ward, and I know that I think both density and the affordability that comes along with the TODs is a huge advantage for us, and I think we want to continue to do that. And just in general, when it comes to development and building, I think that in order for our community to both be safer and in order for our business to thrive, we want to make sure we have people, and there's a density element that goes with that. And so more generally, working with the Department of Planning to get faster permits for developing new projects. It takes forever for developers to actually build a project when they want to. And as you've seen, it can make a big change in terms of the neighborhood, in terms of improving really life for everybody, but especially for the business community there, to have more people right there on top of the stores and the businesses and the restaurants to help them thrive.
Great. Thank you, Patrick. Appreciate that. We'll switch topics a bit to talk about constituent services and diversity. So part of an alderperson's job is to assist residents and businesses with a wide array of requests. And those requests, I'm sure, differ probably wildly from person to person, and they certainly differ from area to area throughout the ward. So with a ward as large and diverse as ours, the question is, how will you balance the needs of progress and development while building trust with all? And that includes our non-native English-speaking neighbors and businesses, without jeopardizing that diversity and the diverse needs of your constituents.
So from a constituent services point, there are a couple of aspects to this that I think are important. One is, what are the needs of the constituents? And one of the things that I plan to do is to have a comprehensive data-driven approach to actually gathering that information. When people call the office or people come into the office with requests and with issues, we're going to track those to determine what part of the ward are they coming from, when are they coming, is it a seasonal thing? Is it, are there certain parts of the ward that have certain needs that other parts of the wards aren't expressing? And I think that will also help to kind of determine and to help focus, where our needs really are, so that we don't leave people out. But I think it's important that, and I've seen this on the zoning development committee, that we are also aware of and sensitive to a wide variety of different perspectives, because people come, this is a very diverse ward, in fact, probably the most diverse ward in the city. And so people come from a wide variety of perspectives, and it's important to be inclusive in how we manage and talk through those and work with people. I know people in the Eritrean community. I know people, in the Russian community and Ethiopian communities and other places within this ward itself. There are so many different, from cultural and language perspectives, people who live in the ward, all of whom need to have a voice, but I think oftentimes don't because of language barriers. So it's important to me, and I've worked with some people who have access to communities to break through those language barriers and to actually be able to work with people so that we can actually understand their needs, because I think sometimes the people who are most likely to come to the alderperson or their office with their questions are people who are native speakers and who are frankly, feel more comfortable with that process. But we still need to make sure that we're looking out for the needs of people who may be more apprehensive about doing that.
Thank you, Patrick. We'll switch now to housing. And so we often discuss affordable housing only as it relates to Uptown or the 46th Ward. But affordable housing is a citywide and even national issue. The city's tackling the issue through multi-pronged initiatives, including enhanced ARO, the new ETOD Connected Communities Ordinance, and accessory dwelling units, ADUs. But as alderperson, how will you balance the need for continued development and investment in Uptown to bring more opportunities and amenities to the area, with the need to make sure that Uptown, and by extension the city, are affordable to all who wish to live here?
Well, you're absolutely right. We have a housing shortage in this country of over 3 million homes. We have a housing shortage in Chicago, and most northern cities do have, larger cities do have this. And we see it also in California on the West Coast. And it's a real issue. When we talk about affordable housing, though, I think, we often conflate different concepts. So affordable housing as defined as the median, someone who can afford to purchase, a house in the median income or an apartment in the neighborhood is one aspect of that. And then subsidized housing is another aspect of that. And I think the 46th Ward right now is the leader of all wards. Certainly Uptown is the leader of all communities in Chicago and having the most subsidized housing units, in the city. We're also very geographically small. We're the densest ward in the entire city by size. So land here is not cheap. In fact, it's very expensive. So building can be tricky. And I've seen this play out many times before. So when we do look at building, and we have a supply and demand issue too, which when it comes to sort of what we call more organic affordable housing, which would be, hey, if I wanted to move to this neighborhood, could I afford a place, right? That is a real issue right now, in that we have very high demand, which is great. We want high demand, but we have very low supply. And so when it comes to building and designing, our ward and our future of the ward, we have to think about density. We have to think about building buildings that are going to be maybe a little bit larger than people are comfortable with, because it serves multi-purposes. It gets more people into the ward. It reduces ultimately the demand for property, which means rents won't rise as fast as they are now. And also with the affordable, as you pointed out, with the ARO, 20%, there's a 20% set aside for affordable housing. So the more units you have, the more affordable housing units you have that are subsidized for people who can't otherwise afford to live there. So I think there's a balance there, but it's going to have to include density.
Great. Thank you, Patrick. Appreciate that. Let's talk about zoning and development a bit. So zoning and development are big topics in any neighborhood. Currently, aldermen are given prerogative over zoning in their ward, and each alderperson has a different way of reviewing and approving zoning requests. Uptown United's Development Partners Committee is one example of many neighborhood organizations that provide feedback on proposed projects in Uptown. What would be your process for reviewing and approving zoning changes if you were alderperson? And again, be as specific as you can.
Sure. So as I as I noted before, I've been on the Zoning and Development Committee for a dozen years now, which feels like 50. And I can say that, you know, a lot of people are critical of the process and how it works. Most of those people aren't, though, engaging in the process. And the toughest part about getting a sort of neighborhood consensus is actually getting people to care about zoning and development and to show up for meetings and to participate. Not just when it's a building that's across the street from your house that you really care about, but when it's something else in the community at large. One of the things that I would like to sort of shift away from is, rather than focus on this building by building kind of concept, I'd like to bring leaders together and stakeholders together from the community. And I'd like to set some parameters as to what kind of development we want, where we want it, and how we want it to look. So, for example, if you're talking about a major thoroughfare like a Broadway or Sheridan, obviously that would be different than, you know, Gunnison. You know, you've got to kind of look at where you're at and what type of building you want and what are the needs of the community, and set those parameters far in advance so that when we do have individual proposals that come before us, we already have sort of our set of our parameters that we want to look at each project through the lens of, rather than treat each project completely independently of any kind of vision or any kind of overall plan. I think that's where we get bogged down, because then, you know, as they say, it's the NIMBYism, right? It's like, I want development, but I just don't want it, you know, on my street. Well, you know, if nobody wants it on their street, we're not going to have it. And that's problematic. So we need to, I think also, in order to make people more comfortable, have this sort of transparent approach where, like, these are the places we were looking to develop. These are the types of things that we want in the development. And I think if we do that, we can actually build consensus before we start looking at the individual plans and individual projects.
Excellent. Thank you very much, sir. Let's talk now about education. So enrollment in Chicago public schools continues to decline. In fact, it's 11th straight year of declining. Uptown United and the Uptown Chamber certainly strive to build strong relationships with our schools through targeted programming and partnerships with neighborhood businesses and organizations. But what steps would you take to spark increased enrollment in all of our neighborhood schools?
Well, in our neighborhood, we have the 5th fewest number of school-age children of any ward in the city. So we're already starting off at a deficit in terms of actual kids in the neighborhood. In fact, many of our schools primarily are feeder schools for kids from farther away who come, you know, who are brought to the schools because our schools otherwise would be virtually empty. So that's an issue in and of itself. Getting back to the housing issue, one of the problems we have is that it's not really a problem. It's just the fact, right? We're a dense ward. We have a lot of units in high rises, especially along the lakefront, and those aren't necessarily conducive to having, you know, large families in them, because a lot of them are 1 bedrooms and studios. And so if you have a couple kids, you know, that makes it a lot more challenging. So when we look at how we're going to build and zone for the future, we also need to take into account the need for some larger actual units that families could potentially live in, like my family does, for example. We're in a mid-rise, but we have enough space that I can have 2 kids and my wife in the same house. That's not true for a lot of people, and our housing stock is not reflective of a neighborhood that is actually embracing of having schools. So I think that's first and foremost what we need to do. But, you know, we have a lot of challenges with our school system. The funding streams is a big one. You know, the state of Illinois basically it acknowledges that they're only funding 67% of the money that we need on their own formula, which leaves a $2 billion deficit every year, which then has to be paid for by the taxpayers of Chicago. Or oftentimes is the case, we have schools that are underfunded, and that in of itself is a challenge. And when you talk about declining enrollment, I think that fits into the picture too. It's a complicated issue, and I know we don't have a lot of time, but I think the school issue needs to be addressed from multiple fronts, both from a funding perspective, but also from the realistic perspective of how do we attract actual families into the neighborhood.
Thank you, Patrick. The next question, in fact, the next two questions are in a similar vein here, where it was one of the most asked about topics from all the submitted questions that came in. And so it's obvious that many of our neighbors are concerned with safety on all forms of mobility, whether that be bikes, CTA, buses. So what policies as Alderperson, what policies and practices do you support to improve mobility and safety for pedestrians, cyclists, and those traveling on the CTA?
So transportation safety is the question?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Because safety is a big issue in many reforms. Okay, so from the day I launched my campaign, my initial kickoff, one of my top issues was CTA. And it's the issue of the CTA, which I've been taking for decades downtown on the Red Line to work and back every day. It needs to be safer, cleaner, more reliable, and more accessible. There are a lot of issues with the CTA, but from the safety perspective, I am a strong believer that instead of having contract security guards, we do need to have actual police on the subway cars, because that's a more effective way of stopping some of the horrific crimes we've seen on the subway system just over the last couple of years. Right now, the truth of the matter is, if my wife's coming home at like 9 o'clock from downtown, I tell her to take an Uber because it's just not worth the risk of what can happen. And that's great for us. But if you're working and you're not making much money and you have no choice but to take the CTA at all hours of the day, that's the working people of Chicago who are really bearing the brunt of the risks for that. And that's not fair to them either. So we desperately need to make the CTA safer. As far as other kinds of safety, like with bike safety, I'm a proponent of having a bike grid in Chicago where we have bike prioritized streets in a grid so that people can get around the city with bicycles, but without necessarily we've had so many horrific bicycle accidents with fatalities in uptown and throughout the city. And then even the ones without fatalities, we get thousands of people are injured on bikes every year. Protective bike lanes are one possibility. The bike grid, I think, is also kind of a more nuanced and I think probably in many respects a better long-term solution, because you can travel across the city. You can't put protective bike lanes on every street because they're just not wide enough. But the bike grid gives us the opportunity to really to reach that goal, but in I think a more appropriate way.
Thank you, Patrick. And I think the next question in many ways is what you were asking for clarification on, which is the general safety, right? So neighborhood safety is certainly one of the top concerns for residents and local business owners. We also know that police are only one part of encouraging neighborhood safety. Communication and awareness is another. As example, United in the Chamber's partnership with the state's attorney's Community Justice Center that facilitates ongoing communication with businesses through business safety meetings. But we would like to know, as Alderperson, what do you think are the most pressing safety issues, and what specific strategies would you use to build a safer uptown?
So the most pressing safety issue across the entire city of Chicago is violent crime, and it's gun crime. And our streets are frankly flooded with illegal guns right now. And you see it represented in, the fact that in the first 2 weeks of January this year, we had 99 armed carjackings in the city of Chicago. I mean, that's unacceptable. That's not what American cities have. I mean, we are an aberration in that front. And we need to address violent crime. Now, my perspective and my approach for that is fairly nuanced. Do we need more police? Absolutely. And in the short term, that is the way to reduce violent crime. Empirical evidence will show that the additional police will help as a deterrent. But we also need, I think, a comprehensive citywide plan, and as Alderperson, a ward plan to actually address crime on multiple parallel levels. It's not just about adding police. It's about other sort of longer term ideas. For example, the Heartland Alliance has the READY program, right, to try to get kids otherwise who might be inclined to engage in illegal activity, but get them into more vocationally work, vocational work. We've got even for younger kids, like the Becoming a Man program, which I think, seems to be successful on a smaller scale. Those are the types of programs that, for example, the University of Chicago Crime Lab is looking at and tracking. And this is the most important element of this. We need to track with data to see what programs are successful and what aren't. And if they're successful, those are the programs we want to put our funding into. And so far, the ones I've mentioned, for example, are 2 examples that have been successful. And so we have to do a number of things, both in terms of adding police, but also sort of long-term proven crime prevention programs, so that we don't have this in perpetuity, the high crime that we have now. But it is probably, I believe, the #1 issue facing the city.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you very much for all those answers. Very much appreciate the insight. I'll give you a second to shake it off, take a sip of water if you want, because we're going to move on to the lightning round questions.
All right.
And again, just as a reminder, we're looking for 1 sentence, maybe 10 seconds or less. You get bonus points if you get 1-word answer. We'll go for that. But some of these are quite hard to narrow down to such a small answer. But I think we'll have a little bit of fun here as well. So with that, on to the lightning round. Starts with a hard one. What's your favorite thing about the 46th Ward?
The people. My wife and I are in an interracial marriage with multiracial children. We feel comfortable here. We love this community. We feel accepted.
So Patrick, I apologize. And I did do this to the others as well. So
I'm done.
People was very good. Yep, but still gonna cut you out. All right, very good. Thank you. So next question. What elected official, and this could be alive or dead, local or national, but what elected official do you most admire?
Well, that's a tough one. Paul Simon.
Okay.
Who I worked for as an intern when I was in college.
Next one, I will tell you, full disclosure, when we asked it, the crowd did go, ooh. So just so you know. So next question, who are you supporting for mayor?
I'm a sitting judge in the federal government, so I'm not going to tell you. I've looked at the candidates. I have my thoughts, but I don't feel it's my place, nor would I want to influence people in that capacity. So I wish everybody would just do the research, figure out who they want. I know who I want, and let's see what happens.
Fair answer, and thank you for that. The next one, and I explained this to the other candidates as well. This may be the one that you look back to say this made, or this can make or break the whole campaign right here. Chicago hot dog or Chicago deep dish?
2 of my favorite things. I have to go deep dish.
Very good. Next question. If you had to have a running mate for this election, which one of your opponents would you select?
Rashonda Williams.
Thank you.
She's awesome.
And
we had a great time.
The last one of the lightning round ones. If you could pick a fictional world to be a politician in, and think it could be Game of Thrones, it could be Star Wars, you could be down in Pawnee, Indiana with Leslie Knope and Parks and Rec. If you could pick a fictional world to be a politician in, what would that be?
I would say that's a tough question. I'm blanking on the name of the show, so that's bad. Let's see. Well, I would West Wing.
There you go. Okay. All right. Very good.
It's been a while since I've seen it, so I was having trouble remembering the name of it. But I saw Martin Sheen, and I'm like, dude, what's the name of your show?
It's a good throwback. It's a classic.
Very good. Well, Patrick, again, thank you so much for taking the time to talk through all those topics and to do the lightning round with us. Now, and again, with a 2-minute time, would love to give you an opportunity just to give a closing statement for everybody. And so the floor is yours.
Thank you. And I really appreciate the time you've taken to and the extraordinary steps you've taken to let me present my positions on issues with you today. So thank you very much for that. I think that right now we are facing crisis in leadership in the city, and we need to turn things around, and we need to do it quickly. And we've got several issues that I think are very pressing that have to be addressed first. One is the public safety issue. As a former federal prosecutor, I've actually successfully prosecuted illegal violent criminals in court. I understand the criminal justice system, and I also feel very passionately that we need a coordinated plan to address crime, because the ad hoc approach that we've taken for the last several years doesn't work. And we need to really kind of set down with stakeholder involvement what it is that we're really trying to aim at for the city. Because when I travel around the country, as I was last week and when I missed your forum, and I tell people I'm from Chicago, they're like, wow, that's a really dangerous place. And I get defensive and I say, no, it's a great place. But, you know, in when I'm talking to my fellow Chicagoans and my fellow 46 warders, you know, yeah, we need to improve our safety. It's not where it needs to be, and it's gotten worse, and we need to correct that. So that's the first issue that is important to me. But then the parallel to that is we really do need to address our fiscal situation. We've got a lot of challenges because of our pension burden and because of the debt we need to service. We have a lot of programs we want to fund, but property taxes in the 46th ward, not to depress anybody, but residential property taxes in the last 20 years have gone up over 200%, far greater than the rate of inflation, 4 times as great. And we really have to look at how we're addressing our funding situation, because we can't continue to put the burden on commercial and residential property taxes because it's an unsustainable it's an unsustainable paradigm. And so we need to get our fiscal or the state of our fiscal structure in order, and we need to reduce our crime problem right now. Those are the top 2 reasons why I'm running. I've got leadership experience in federal government, running a large organization, and I think that I'm the best person to handle these issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patrick. And Sarah, if you want to close this out.
Yes, you know, and I was just thinking back of, you said taking extraordinary measures. I'm just grateful for the time and the commitment that you put into running. As I expressed to all the other candidates, it takes a lot in passion to want to jump into this type of race. And so I'm very appreciative of your participation in democracy. We had fantastic turnout. Despite the cold weather, and I think it's fitting today that it is equally cold today that we are conducting this interview, but deeply appreciative of your commitment to the ward, to participating in our forum, I'll bet in a different format, but very much appreciate this, and we look forward to February 28th. And just as a reminder, we're located at 4619 North Broadway, our new storefront, right across the street from the future home of Chicago Market. And as I closed out the other evening, we welcome our candidates and our neighbors to come check us out. You know, United is your neighborhood economic development nonprofit organization. So we're putting on your free events like Art Week and the successful Lunar New Year parade we just had, and Argyle Night Market, to all of our centennial events coming up to celebrate the chamber, which turns 100. So invite you to join us at our office sometime, maybe when it's above, single digit wind chills. But thank you, Patrick. Deeply appreciative of your.
I will bring some Stan's Donuts with me from,
well,
from next door.
I will counter and say you should stop by our new friend over at Downstate Donuts on Wilson Avenue.
They're good too. Look, when it comes to donuts, I don't discriminate. I'll eat from all donut places.
Same thing. So thank you so much for your commitment to the ward, to your passion, to participating in democracy. And we, as soon as we wrap this up, it'll get posted alongside of our other videos. So thank you.
Thank you again.